Well, hey there! After the reveal that Clea Strange was taking up the mantle of Earth's Sorcerer Supreme, I started thinking about the Death of Doctor Strange series as a whole, and what importance certain tie ins might have in the larger story. I predict that moving forward, we might need to talk a little bit more about the Bloodstone family and the source of their power, the Blood Gem. The Blood Gem is a conduit for a point in space time that all magical energies pass through, called the Hellfire Helix. It was created by a set of godly beings from a dying chaotic universe in attempts for them to travel into other dimensions. And somehow, the encapsulated Hellfire Helix manifested its own consciousness externally from the gem called the Exomind. This consciousness had no interest in the plans of the Chaos Gods and created a guardian named Euluxiel Quantison. After the collapse of that universe, the Blood Gem was flung through the Big Bang event of the birth of the new universe. And at some point around 8,000 something BCE, the gem falls to Earth, and the Exomind sends Euluxiel to Earth to guard it. He builds a citadel around the gem, and a hunter of a primitive tribe who has taken notice of the gem falling to Earth and set out to investigate it comes upon Euluxiel's fortress. The hunter engages Euluxiel in battle, and the demigod far outpowers the mortal man. But now here's the really interesting part. Instead of killing him or banishing him for his attack, Euluxiel rewards the hunter. He shows him the blood gem and tells him that it is true power, and instructs him to stand before it and peer into the gem for strength, power, and even immortality. Euluxiel offers to make him a god of men. Frozen in place, the hunter is blasted with a beam of energy from the blood gem, and he is imbued with great power. Astonished, the hunter returns to his village to recant the tale. Later, the hunter returns with several members of his tribe, and he wishes Euluxiel to bless them all, to grant all of the men of his tribe the same powers that he has given him. Curiously, the guardian agrees and aligns them in a certain way, dictating that they do not move at all during the ritual. Moments in, the tribe collectively start to have visions of horrific cosmic entities and vast sprawling multitudes of dimensions and universes, and they begin to go mad. As the tribe writhes in pain, they fall out of formation, and in his frustration, Euluxiel proclaims two key factors. One is that their minds are not strong enough to withstand the awesome might of the Hellfire Helix. That seemingly the hunter must have possessed a higher consciousness and stronger mental constitution than the rest of his tribe, or even most of humanity living at that time, 8,000 something BCE. The second thing that the Guardian mentions is that had they held out moments longer, the Guardian would have been able to use the ritual to obtain the full power of the gem and become host of the Exomind himself. Meanwhile, the enraged hunter rushes to the gem and breaks it to stop the spell and save his tribe. However, the shattering of the blood gem causes a massive explosion, sending fragments of the gem shooting out across the land. One of these pieces was embedded into the breastplate of the hunter. Euluxiel escapes and spends the next 10,000 years collecting fragments, while the Exomind observes the evolution of humanity from the stone embedded in the chest of the hunter. The hunter who vowed revenge against Euluxiel became known as Ulysses Bloodstone. During that 10,000 years, Bloodstone hunted and killed every demon and beast he came across, looking for the one that killed his tribe. But once these pieces had been gathered, and the Exomind had experienced one perspective of life for a decamillennium, it set into motion a series of events. It gathered a group that called itself the Conspiracy. Yeah, I know, kinda lame. But they lured Bloodstone into a trap and removed the final fragment from his chest and reformed the whole blood gem. The conspirators were then combined with the blood gem into a single crystalline being, a new form and host of the Exomind. Ulysses, who is now reverted to his original primitive state, seeks to stop the construct and connects with it using his third eye. Projecting his astral form into the gem, Ulysses finds the Exomind and learns that it is called such because it is not the blood gem's true intellect. It is only the outer mind, a projection to protect the Hellfire Helix deep within. With his spear, he penetrates the Exomind and severs its connection to the gem. Behind it, he finds the Helix, the source of immense cosmic power, the source of what took his people from him and manipulated him for 10,000 years. Finally achieving his revenge, he lets out a battle cry and strikes the Helix, causing the gem construct to shatter and render out the blast that finally claims the life of Ulysses Bloodstone. Even though that seems like a long and sprawling history that spans centuries, Ulysses Bloodstone's first published appearance was in 1975 with Marvel Presents issues 1 and 2. Then, in a backup feature in 1977's Rampaging Hulk, Bloodstone met his end. Out of his 50 credited appearances, he died in the first 10. The rest has all been backfill, flashbacks, and retcons. And don't worry, we'll get to the retcon soon. As one final note before we get to the modern Bloodstone family, it's worth noting that Ulysses was always featured as a guest spot or in team-ups or in backup features, but never had a standalone book of his own. Then, about 20 years ago, Elsa Bloodstone first came onto the scene, with a 4-issue standalone simply titled Bloodstone, where she discovered that her father was the legendary monster hunter Ulysses. It's important to note that in this series, she had never met her father and was raised by her mother, who was pregnant at the time of the comic. That's important too. She's an American teenager and learns of her lineage while visiting her deceased father's estate in England. Elsa then goes on a set of Indiana Jones-style adventures, hunting monsters and trying to live up to her father's legacy. So far, I'd call this backfilling and not a change in continuity, establishing something that doesn't yet exist within the original parameters. It doesn't change anything about Ulysses' story. He was still a monster hunter who lived 10,000 years and still perished in the same way. However, in 2006, Elsa appeared in a new book called Next Wave: Agents of Hate. But this version of Elsa was vastly different. Now natively British, a redhead, and an expert markswoman who has years of monster hunting under her belt, having been ruthlessly trained by her father from a young age. Yes, not only does this version of the character grow up knowing her father, but it goes as far as to claim that Ulysses was downright abusive and not at all a good man. This point completely contradicts everything that we know about Ulysses, who up until then has always been depicted as a hero. In fact, the reason the Exomine wanted free from Bloodstone was, and I quote, "The gem has observed all that it can through innocent eyes, and it wishes a new perspective, an evil perspective, something it couldn't get through Ulysses." Next Wave was later stated by Marvel editors to be its own set of continuity, which makes things even more confusing since she's appeared over 70 times since Next Wave, and that's the only version of the character that we've seen again. And in 2013, this retcon was reinforced in Avengers Arena with the introduction of Colin Bloodstone, Elsa's little brother who fits into both timelines. Son of a bitch! In the 2001 timeline, Elsa's mother is pregnant and this could very well be Colin. However, it stated clearly that he too was raised by his father and received as cruel a training as Elsa. On his 10th birthday, his father took him on a hunting trip in a hell dimension known as the Black Realm of Kalimtor, where Ulysses left Colin overnight for a survival exercise. He planned to return in the morning, however, the conspiracy intervened and the events of Rampaging Hulk took place, leaving Colin stranded for over 2 years. Elsa and the rest of the family assumed Colin had been in boarding school, so she was certainly surprised to see him at their family home when she returned for supplies. Colin wasn't the same. He had been possessed by a demonic parasite known as Glartrox. Elsa was able to keep Colin subdued with the use of a bloodstone that they fastened into a ring for him to wear. And with this being the only version of the Bloodstone family moving forward, one would assume that that was that. But now we get a Bloodstone one-shot connected to the Death of Doctor Strange miniseries, and it gives yet another perspective on Ulysses, with the introduction of Lyra, the hunter's firstborn daughter, who says that she was sacrificed and cast out and sent away with the Null Gem, a counterpart to the Blood Gem, as a price that Ulysses paid for his power. And she tells them that the Bloodstone drives its wielder mad, and that it can corrupt and change its user. She wonders how they have managed to utilize the Bloodstones for as long as they have without succumbing to its madness. Perhaps that's because Ulysses severed the Exomind's connection to the blood gem before he died. Maybe that's part of the reason for his behavior with Elsa and Colin. Perhaps 10,000 years of endless struggle and conflict shifts one's perspective on what lessons a child should be taught. Like here, where he mentions having tried several times before with offspring that never survived. His harshness gave Elsa and Colin the tools that they needed to be survivors. Or perhaps he's just a terrible father. Either way, Elsa was a member of the Fearless Defenders alongside Clea, who is now the Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, an office that was previously responsible for keeping Lyra locked away. So I suspect that we will get more developments on the Bloodstone family in the near future. But this should offer some insight on Marvel's premier monster hunting family. Until next time.